You awaken to the delicate chime of silver spoons gliding across fine porcelain, the whisper of silk gowns sweeping over polished marble floors, and beneath it all, a pervasive scent, sweet and overpowering, laced with an undercurrent that twists your insides. Courtiers, their faces half concealed behind scented handkerchiefs, bowed deeply before a regal figure enthroned upon a seat of unparalleled splendor. His wig tumbles in flawless curls down his shoulders, his coat shimmers with threads of purest gold, and his silk stockings gleam like fresh snow. From afar he embodies magnificence incarnate, yet venture nearer, close enough to discern the faint quiver in his bejeweled hand. This is September 1715, and before you sits Louis XIV of France, once hailed as the most resplendent monarch in all of Europe, now succumbing to a slow, inexorable decay amid the gaze of his assembled court. Before we delve deeper into these veiled tales of endurance and anguish, if you find fascination in uncovering history's concealed truths, I invite you to express your appreciation by engaging with this content, perhaps by bestowing a like, subscribing for further explorations, and sharing in the comments the corner of the world from which you join us. It astonishes me how we, separated by vast distances, converge through time and space, bound by our collective intrigue with the echoes of yesteryear. Louis, Duc de Bourbon, entered the world on the 5th of September 1638, within the walls of the Château de Saint-Germain-en-Laye, following 23 barren years in his parents' union. His arrival was deemed so extraordinary that whispers among the courtiers proclaimed him a divine bestowal, inspiring his middle name, Dieudonné, God-given. His father, Louis, from his infancy, the young Louis navigated a realm where each gesture bore profound significance, every gaze conveyed unspoken intent, and his very existence was intertwined with the destiny of France. Upon his father's death, those formative years were shadowed by the turmoil of the Fronde, a cascade of noble uprisings rejecting the crown's dominion, forcing the royal household into nocturnal flight from Paris. Envision a terrified boy, scarcely a decade old, hurried through dimly lit passages as furious shouts reverberated beyond the palace barriers. Louis would later recount feigning slumber in his bedchamber. That profound indignity, that visceral dread of vulnerability, etched itself indelibly into his soul. When he assumed direct governance in 1661, upon Mazarin's passing, Louis, at 22, stood tall for his time at 5 feet 4 inches, possessing an innate elegance that rendered even mundane motions a symphony of poise. Chronicles of the era depict him as authentically striking, eyes of deep darkness that ensnared the light, a harmoniously sculpted visage, and the physique of an athlete. Yet, as Louis would come to fathom, such allure proved as ephemeral as the morning mist. His sovereignty commenced auspiciously. In 1660, he wed his cousin, Maria Theresa of Spain, a matrimonial alliance forged to cement tranquility between their realms. The nuptials unfolded as a pageant of opulent silks and gleaming gold, graced by multitudes, with festivities extending across days. Maria Theresa was portrayed as amiable yet unexceptional, a consort destined to dwell in the obscurity cast by her. For Louis, bound by obligation, could scarcely withstand the allure of beauty. His inaugural profound liaison ignited almost forthwith with Louise de la Vallière. He supplanted her with Françoise Athénée de Rochefort, renowned as Madame de Montespan, a paragon of wit and allure, who rendered Louise akin to a rustic maiden. Montespan embodied the sophistication he craved, incisive, audacious in the face of authority. She bore him 7 offspring, paraded their bond before the court, and ascended to such sway that envoys from abroad courted her favor ere approaching the throne. Yet even she sufficed not. Louis craved perpetual novelty, renewed adulation, fresh triumphs to affirm his vigor and dominion. His dalliances attained legendary status, not merely for their multitude but for the ornate customs enveloping them. Mistresses were bestowed lavish quarters at Versailles, exalted titles, and prodigious stipends. His queen, meanwhile, withdrew into devotion and indulgences of chocolate. The edifice Louis erected at Versailles endures as history's paramount architectural stratagem. Upon relocating his court there in 1682, he crafted not a mere residence but an intricate snare. Every noble of consequence was compelled to reside there seasonally, vying for royal notice through a labyrinthine code of decorum that reduced aristocrats to squabbles over privileges as trivial as proffering the king's chemise during his morning ablutions. Conceive the stifling oppression of that domain. throngs confined to dwellings diminishing in comfort with distance from favor, the miasma of unbathed forms mingled with his lever. The ritual of dressing evolved into diurnal spectacle, where dukes vied for the distinction of presenting his breeches. His coucher, the bedtime ceremony, transmuted repose into political theatre, privacy evaporated, and inexorably, this theatrical essence devoured the mortal beneath the diadem. Wars ensued in relentless succession, siphoning France's coffers and populating Europe's sepulchres. Louis waged campaigns against Spain, Holland, England, Austria, oftentimes concurrently. In 1685, he annulled the Edict of Nantes, compelling Protestant Huguenots to exile or convert, with resistors facing captivity, torment, or demise. Families sundered, progeny wrested from kin, communities obliterated. His commanders Condé, Turenne, Luxembourg forged mythic renown. At Versailles, the pageantry persisted. Louis matured with dignity initially, his inherent poise and meticulous adornment veiling time's march. In his 40s, he discovered profound attachment with Françoise Scarron, later Madame de Maintenon, a widow in her 30s, who had nurtured his illegitimate progeny. Where prior lovers dazzled with beauty, Maintenon shone with intellect. Where they demanded, she subtly embedded herself as essential. Their bond matured gradually, woven from discourses on faith, rule, and pedagogy. Upon Maria Theresa's abrupt passing in 1683, rumored poison, though dysentery more probable, Louis mourned authentically. Despite their dispassionate union, she had been a steadfast companion for 23 years, unmarred by scandal. Under her influence, Louis embraced piety, pursuing ethical reformation, distancing himself from carnal delights that once defined him. Then commenced his body's perfidy. It began subtly, a persistent dental ache, bleeding gums, breath unmaskable by floral essences. Louis had long vaunted his teeth, uncommonly alabaster, and aligned for an age bereft of dental science. By the 1680s, however, corruption infiltrated. His erudite physicians advocated extraction sans anesthesia, restraining the monarch as surgeons wielded rudimentary forceps to excise festering molars. Louis bore it with regal. Worse ensued. An abscess swelled his jaw, distorting his countenance while courtiers feigned oblivion. The contagion burrowed, forging a fissure betwixt mouth and sinus. Victuals and libations occasionally escaped his nostrils, necessitating elaborate repast protocols to obscure the shame. Desperate healers proposed cauterization. In January 1685, they bound him to a slab and seared the breach with incandescent iron. No palliation, no antiseptic insight, merely scorching metal against raw bone and sinew, eliciting suppressed agonies from Europe's mightiest sovereign. The procedure faltered, exacerbating ruin with taut scars that twisted his lips into eternal rictus. Yet Louis upheld his regimen, presiding over assemblies, diplomacy, rites enduring ceaseless torment and articulatory strife. Courtiers averted eyes from dribbling fare at banquets, from crimsoned linens dabbing his mouth. Versailles' ornate protocols, once glorifying, now afflictions compounded. Gout assailed extremities, rendering ambulation, torment, and script nigh impossible. Limbs, once lithe from terpsichore and equitation, bloated with effusion, necessitating nightly. He perpetuated the myth of impeccable sovereignty. Valets layered cosmetics to veil ashen hues. Coiffeurs fashioned grandiose perukes to mask alopecia. Satyrs refashioned garb to flatter his altered frame while sustaining majestic illusion. The odor, however, eluded total suppression. Commencing as halitosis quelled by botanicals, it metastasized with oral and pharyngeal infections, gastric woes, bodily dissolution, a saccharine, nauseous aura trailing him. Personal calamities amplified corporeal woe. His heir, Louis le Grand Dauphin, succumbed to variola in 1711. His grandson, the succeeding Dauphin, in 1712. Illegitimate progeny fared scarcely better. The Duc de Maine, Montespan's scion, labored with deformity and frailty. The Comte de Toulouse promised much but inherited naught. Decades elevating bastards with dignities availed little as legitimate descent crumbled. Conflicts persisted, eviscerating France. The War of the Spanish Succession, 1701-1714, arrayed France against continental foes in throne contention. Catastrophes at Blenheim, Ramillies, Malplaquet claimed noble youth by legions, while the enfeebled king projected fortitude from Versailles' auric confines. The 1709 winter-wrought apocalypse, frosts congealed wine in chalices, ink in quills, famine-ignited Parisian tumults. Dispatches narrated kin incinerating furnishings for warmth, juveniles perishing. Louis perhaps glimpsed his creation's monstrosity. Versailles, engineered for dominion and awe, imprisoned him as surely as his vassals. Abandoning rituals confessed debility. Displaying anguish emboldened foes. Repose implied dereliction. The spectacle had subsumed the sovereign, and his union with Maintenon matured into marital semblance, comfortable, sporadically tender, oft strained by their singular plight. She adjoined his chambers, mirrored his rhythms, attended ceremonies, partook meals when his marred maw permitted. Yet she served as confessor, counselor, conduit to piety engrossing his mind. They oversaw a court dimmed in luster. Elders perished or aged, heirs lacking ancestral finesse. Wars beggared lineages, compelling dukes to indebtedness for finery. Maintenon's spiritual resurgence quelled libidinous Still, continental pilgrims marveled at the pageant. A king upholding carriage despite evident torment, enunciating lucidly despite oral havoc, emanating command despite evident wane. The charade persisted, for frailty invited incursion, sedition, or graver perils. By 1714, Utrecht's accord restored peace, yet at ruinous toll. France insolvent, populace decimated, adversaries fortified. Louis had elevated France to hegemony, but sowed seeds for the his frame relentlessly decayed. Gout-crippled joints, effusion-bloated limbs. Healers deployed leeches, cathartics, phlebotomy archaic. Maintenon discovered him upright amid shadows, conversing with phantoms. Courtiers deciphered omens. Auspicious days yielded steady gait, clear oratory, sustained hunger, dire ones annulled events, summoned medics, intensified the fetid sweetness permeating halls. August 1715 heralded the terminus. A sable lesion upon his limb, likely gangrene, ascended inexorably. Frantic yet he demanded continuance of rites. Bolstered a bed, he entertained envoys, endorsed decrees, conferred with statesmen. Maintenon scarcely departed, reciting scriptures, joining supplications, aiding missives to his great-grandson, the nascent Louis XV. These valedictory writings unveil a soul reckoning with legacy. Courtiers maneuvered for succession, realigning allegiances for regency over the juvenile monarch. Versailles' intricate order hinged upon one persona, fractured as that. The 1st of September 1715 commemorated Louis's 77th natal day, an extraordinary longevity, miraculous for a ruler. His 5-year-old great-grandson was summoned bedside for parting counsel. The lad, daunted by stench and gloom, grasped little of the rasped admonitions on gangrene progressed amid torturous remedies. Corrosive scorched rot, blades incised corrupt. By early September, pretense faltered, putrescence saturated quarters despite ventilation and aromatics. His timbre faded, compelling proximity to perceive. Exhausted, Maintenon withdrew to St. Cyr convent, some deemed desertion, others mercy, granting him demise as he existed, solitary amid his fabricated cosmos. On the 1st of September 1715, 4 days shy of 77, Louis XIV expired at Versailles. His passing, like his existence, was staged, yet demise obscured not final horrors. Embalmers beheld beauty devoured by affliction, poetic countenance, unrecognizable, dignified form, a failing vessel sustained by volition and right. His obsequies theatricalized, procession to Saint-Denis spanned hours, beheld by multitudes unseen in life. Ceremonials, dirges, waxen torrents, all alchemizing tragedy into enigma. Whispers trailed, tales of Versailles' final feta, concealments via cosmetics and pomp, queries on power's worth amid isolation. France respired relief. The Sun King's, his great-grandson inherited throne and woes presaging monarchy's doom. Courtiers dispersed like autumn foliage, adapting, vanishing, fleeing. Maintenon, clandestine consort, endured to 1,719 inches devotion at St. Cyr, silent on Louis, unwed anew, seemingly unhealed from witnessing power's consumption. Versailles waned sans solar animation. Hollow, grandeur oppressive. Successors resided, yet none infused Louis's blend of splendor, and fervor. History enshrines Louis XIV as absolutism's apex, the sovereign proclaiming l'état, c'est moi with literal intent. His 72-year, 110-day reign, Europe's lengthiest, transfigured France from feudal realm to modern polity, birthed enduring cultural marvels, set diplomatic archetypes, yet he perished. Perchance his legacy's essence, not palace, conquests, arts, but a man of worldly plenitude, rotting alive amid observers feigning blindness to evident decay. You awaken to silver spoons on porcelain, yet repast concludes. Courtiers depart, throne vacant. Lingering sweetness dissipates, sauce born in fleur-de-lis shroud. Europe's fairest king transmutes to reminiscence, and reminiscences, unlike flesh, decay not, they wane, bequeathing tales of power, allure, and the dire cost of transcending humanity. John McCarthy, proprietor of sundry dwellings in Miller's Court where Mary Kelly resided, epitomized the intricate entwinements between honorable enterprise and prostitution in Victorian proletarian precincts. He amassed rents from women cognizant of their trade, extending leniency when exigency arose, furnishing rudimentary safeguards essential to their sustenance. "I inquire not into my tenants' means of livelihood," McCarthy averred at Mary Kelly's inquiry. "My endeavor is to furnish sanitary, secure lodgings at tariffs accessible to laborers. Should I bar women of dubious repute, half my holdings would languish vacant. These ladies remit dues punctually, maintain quarters immaculate, and provoke lesser discord than certain male occupants prone to excess in spirits." McCarthy's deposition illuminated how Victorian prostitution interwove with legitimate commerce, reliant upon sex work's revenues while preserving societal detachment from its ethical quandaries. This fiscal symbiosis rendered crusades against prostitution futile, notwithstanding moral indignation. The nexus between intoxicants and prostitution in Victorian milieu layered further exploitation and peril. Taverns functioned as vital communal hubs for the laboring masses, yet doubled as enlistment venues where destitute women fell prey to pimps or madam procurers. Gin emporiums, mushrooming in impoverished quarters mid-century, proffered ephemeral respite via inexpensive libations and ostentatious amusements, yet fostered milieus wherein inebriated women succumbed to carnal predation and induction into the trade. Martha Tabram, slain in George Yard buildings on the 7th of August 1888, exemplified the interlinks of spirits, penury, and susceptibility to brutality defining myriad women's existences in Victorian London's labouring enclaves. Born circa 1849, Martha had wed a furniture porter, Henry Tabram. Ere separation consigned her to sporadic labour and intermittent sex work. On her fatal eve, observers noted Martha imbibing with troopers across Whitechapel alehouses. Her accompaniment of one to seclusion mirrored the calibrated hazards women in her straits routinely hazarded, balancing fiscal urgency against bodily integrity in arenas where neither assured. Martha's demise, antedating the canonical Ripper atrocities, garnered scant journalistic or constabulary scrutiny. It was deemed lamentable yet commonplace fallout from her elected peril, not emblematic of entrenched aggression toward defenseless females. This disparate regard mirrored pervasive Victorian sentiments on assaults upon prostitutes. Fatalities amid trade oft dismissed as vocational perils, not offences warranting rigorous probe. Women vending intimacy were viewed as having relinquished societal safeguards, and compassion afforded virtuous casualties. The disparity sharpened in coverage of canonical Ripper slayings, which captivated intensely, owing to their grotesque savagery transcending routine violence against such women. The dramatic eviscerations compelled recognition of victims as souls enduring extraordinary barbarity, not mere occupational losses. Annie Millwood, enduring a blade assault in February 1888, furnished scarce direct testimony on brutality toward prostituting women. Her declaration to authorities, uttered amid convalescence from near-fatal lacerations, depicted an onslaught typical, save for her endurance to narrate. "He appeared gentlemanly initially," Annie confided to Inspector Reed, "attired finely, courteous in address, claiming proximate chambers for discreet transaction. I ought have discerned otherwise true gentry solicit not on Commercial Street. Yet lodging coin was requisite, and his offer generous." Annie's account unveiled behavioral archetypes, potentially marking assaults on silenced victims. Assailants exploiting prostitutes oft feigned decorum to engender trust ere unveiling ferocity. Women in hazardous milieus gauged patrons swiftly on scant cues, with lethal repercussions for misjudgment. Once secluded, his demeanor altered utterly. Annie proceeded. He ranted of purging streets of vermin like myself, professing divine mandate. I fled, but he brandished steel, advancing frenzied. Sans that constable's hearkening my cries, I'd join the departed. Annie's portrayal of her aggressor's rhetoric purification, celestial duty intimated violence against prostitutes oft stemmed from ethical dogma, framing brutality as sanctification over felony. This doctrinal facet echoed Victorian apprehensions on eros, virtue, and hierarchy. Prostitutes symbolized targets for males unnerved by societal flux or personal nonconformity to respectability's masculine paradigms. Survivors' narratives like Annie's illuminated obscured aggression patterns, rare owing to victims' mortality. Her endurance was anomalous, prompting initial official skepticism presuming prostitute assaults culminated fatally or were contrived for pity. Francis Cole's, persisting until April 1891 air murder under conditions possibly linked to Ripper deeds, embodied protracted fragility marking women's trajectories in Victorian prostitution. Born circa 1865, Frances pursued sundry casual vocations ere economics propelled her to sporadic intimacy sales. Constabulary ledgers chronicle Frances's recurrent brutality encounters pre-demise. Treated for harms at least sixfold from 1,888 to 1,891, typically alleging tumbles or mishaps over admissions implicating assailants, lest tarnish repute or imperil perpetrators. Frances dreaded naming her abusers, attested Ellen, a lodging-house acquaintance. It would exacerbate woes to incite strife against patrons. Better endure blows, aspire to milder handling henceforth. We comprehended such logic, protesting violence branded one troublesome, and troublesome souls attract no clientele. Ellen's words disclosed how fiscal reliance on volatile patrons incentivized abuse tolerance over reportage. Contestation risked revenue loss, distinguishing shelter from vagrancy, rendering mute forbearance pragmatic despite grievous wounds. On the 13th of February 1890, one's eve, Frances was unearthed slain beneath Swallow Garden's rail arch, throat severed in echoes of prior Ripper horrors. Yet by 1891, fascination waned, her passing meriting scant notice despite suggestive ties. This ebbing concern post-1889 illustrated Victorian society's swift reversion to overlooking conditions momentarily jolted into view. Ripper spectacles transiently pierced prostitutes' obscurity, yet scrutiny proved ephemeral sans ongoing drama. Dr. Frederick Gordon Brown, performing necropsies on sundry Ripper casualties, chronicled medical proofs unveiling chronic ailments afflicting Victorian prostitutes. His meticulous dossiers, centered on demise causes, yielded wider glimpses into poverty's and peril's corporeal levy. The late Catherine Eddowes evinced profound renal affliction. Dr. Brown inscribed the 1st of October 1888. Hepatic impairment consonant with chronic inebriation. Cicatrices on limbs implying prior defensive traumas. General state bespeaks extended undernourishment and harsh exposure. Dr. Brown's observations affirmed Ripper victims perished incrementally from indigence, starvation, illness, and violence, ere terminal spectacles. Their lurid finales veiled daily erosion typifying existences. Mary Ann Nichols manifested advanced syphilis, Dr. Brown noted elsewhere. Dental attrition from malnourishment and neglect, persistent pulmonary infection, perchance incipient phthisis. These females succumb gradually, antecedent to violent terminus. Necropsy evidences corroborated social probes' findings, ignored by decorous society. Prostitutes confronted remediable maladies fatal amid destitution and ostracism. Ellen Holland, final conversant with Mary Ann Nichols pre-slaying, testified revealing subsistence ordeals for such women. Ellen knew Mary Ann from Wilmot's lodging, where both quartered when affording 4p nightly. She was intoxicated upon our encounter, Ellen deposed at inquest. Claimed thrice securing lodging funds that day, yet expended on gin over bed. I urged return to Wilmot's, pledging advocacy for gratis stay, but she chuckled, vowing swift DOS-coin procurement, gesturing her fresh bonnet, asserting facile patronage. Ellen's account exposed instantaneous fiscal reckonings governing survival, electing spirits fleeting solace over shelter mirrored destitution's untenable dilemmas. I ought have compelled her accompaniment, Ellen lamented. Covered her fee myself, though mine strained. Yet weariness besets salvaging the unwilling. Mary Ann imbibed excessively months hence, hazarding more, neglecting self. We observed, yet powerless. Ellen's remorse and impotence mirrored psychic burden on women witnessing comrades' decline in inescapable plights. Solidarity amid peers mingled with rivalry for scant means, awareness any might next succumb to brutality or ailment. Mary Ann's terminal hours, pieced from depositions and probes, underscored violence's capriciousness, rendering each liaison potentially lethal for street prostitutes. Spurning Ellen's aid to pursue patrons reflected not folly but pragmatic appraisal of options. The 31st of August 1880, 8th Eve, Mary Ann required fourpence for lodging sans licit means pre-closure. Persisting despite inebriation and fragility embodied habitual gambles, as rough slumber posed equivalent perils. Charles Cross, discovering Mary Ann's form in Buck's Row, averred initially mistaking her for inebriate vagrant mirroring prevalence of such sights in proletarian thoroughfares, blurring homicide from urban woe sans scrutiny. I deemed her another hapless soul over-imbibed, Cross deposed. Such spectacles abound here, women destitute, reposing wheresoever. Proximity revealed anomaly. Posture, gore I discerned beyond drunkenness. Cross's words evinced normalized aggression in laboring quarters. Murder victims mimicked poverty's banal casualties till inspected. Robert Paul, encountering shortly post-Cross, initially demurred, nearing presumed inebriate prostitute, reflecting proletarian males' instilled evasion of such associations, lest sully standing or livelihood. Cross summoned. I hesitated involvement, Paul testified. One learns self-preservation here, especially with such women. Yet his alarm-prompted inspection haunts me still. Paul's reluctance highlighted stigma impeding aid in crises. Potential rescuers faltered when victims seemed prostitutes, fearing compromise. Mary Ann's unearthing initiated cognizance of decades-old enclave's plights, hitherto veiled from propriety. Her demise gained import not for rarity but for compelling acknowledgement of overlooked lives. Inspector John Spratling, overseeing Mary Ann's initial inquiry, documented protocols unveiling enforcement's rote management of prostitute violence. The decedent embodied dissolute ethos. Spratling penned the 1st of September 1888. Habitual of Whitechapel doss houses, no reputable kin for notification. Probe adheres to norms for her ilk. Spratling's verbiage mirrored institutional devaluation. Prostitute victims merited lesser zeal than virtuous, resources apportioned thus. Yet Whitechapel's escalating horrors compelled elevated regard for oft-dismissed perils. Inspector Frederick Aberline, helming Ripper coordination, infused empathy from policing laboring zones, comprehending vulnerability's roots. These women perpetrate no true offense. Aberline confided October 1888. They fall prey to societal ills affording scant alternatives. Inquiry must accord them protection, akin to any violated soul. Aberline's stance, minority in era's constabulary, set benchmarks treating prostitute crimes gravely over predictable fallout. Autumn 1888 fostered unprecedented alliance betwixt police and reformers scrutinizing East End. Entities like London City Mission, Salvation Army, nurtured ties with prostitutes, augmenting official duties. William Booth, Salvation Army progenitor, chronicled prostitution's plights via rescue endeavors. His 1890 tome, In Darkest England and the Way Out, dissected sustaining socio-economic forces, advocating reforms targeting origins over symptoms. The women we aid are not the debauched phantoms of moral tomes, Booth inscribed. They are ensnared mortals amid uncontrollable straits. Indigence, familial rupture, educational dearth, licit works absence. Response must redress these, not chastise afflicted. Booth's scrutiny contested prostitution as personal vice, probing structures, breeding exploitation. His outfit's transitions from trade to legitimacy evinced reform's feasibility with support. Salvation records from 1880 seconds log multitudes exiting prostitution via training, sustenance, stigma shields, proving impermanence when avenues emerged. Sarah arrived 1887. Noted Major Emma Booth, overseeing female rescue. Widowed post, spouse's demise, 2 offspring unsupported. She labored 3 years in Whitechapel House. Our regimen imparted laundering arts. She founded modest venture, employing duo, sustaining kin honorably. Sarah's arc evinced affirmative potentials with aid over censure yet rarities, as Victorian mores furnished scant resources, erecting reintegration barriers. Salvation Labours unveiled prostitution's transnational facets, trafficking webs, shuttling women cross borders, global economics mirroring exploitations. Catherine Bramwell Booth, Continental Rescue Overseer, catalogued English women in European dens, aliens in British. In Brussels, we unearthed 3 English catering Britons. She penned 1,889. Recruited London with servant pledges. Abroad, entrapped by tongues, isolation, escalating debts. Bramwell Booth's trafficking proofs exposed syndicates, exploiting women's border vulnerabilities, severing protections, heightening helplessness. Traffickers prey on desperate, widowed, jobless, alienated, she continued. Proffer crisis salves for binding pacts, reasonable till inescapable. Realization dawns distant, resourceless. Such schemers endured Victorianly and beyond, serving trans-criminal markets amid demand, with barriers thwarting succor. As our odyssey through Victorian prostitution's concealed alcoves and gloomed lanes nears terminus, we confront enduring verity. The apparatus transformed, not terminated, adapting to forms modernity overlooks. Presently, globally, women barter intimacy for subsistence, while decorum upholds illusion of volition over systemic lapse. Whitechapel's gas lamps yielded to digital summons and parlours, yet desperation's calculus persists. Indigence breeds fragility. Marginality bars flight. Violence claims disregarded victims. The women herein: Mary Kelly, Annie Chapman, Catherine Eddowes, Elizabeth Stride. Nameless multitudes persist in altered guises, tongues, yet analogous plights. Their reverberations in contemporary nets, women's exploit choices, trades perils in criminalizing societies, ignoring necessities. Victorian moral theatrics sustaining condemned systems mirror modern statutes, penalizing prostitution, sands addressing poverty, disparity, option dearth rendering intimacy, vending logical amid constraints. Victorian brothels' genuine terror transcended contained anguish, profound in authenticity, but resided in seamless functionality, directing respectable lusts toward disposable women, unchallenging, exploiting society's moral sway. Traverse modern metropolises, airs in neon parlors, gazette escorts, platforms linking commerce. Mechanisms advanced, yet essence, unaltered despair, desire, bridged by gain and abuse. Envision anew that mist-veiled Whitechapel dusk. 1888. Hearken negotiations, treads, stifled laments. Recall these resonances cease, not relocated where propriety heeds not, behind novel veneers, upheld by survival's timeless ledger that led Mary Kelly to Miller's Court that ultimate November eve, unlatching to outer obscurity.